The warning lights flashed across the bridge of the stellar winds, bathing the alien crew in pulses of red emergency lighting. Captain Reed's antenna twitched nervously as another systems report appeared on the main screen. The cargo vessel's engine readings made no sense. They were dropping out of normal space travel speeds at an alarming rate. "Status report," Reed commanded, his thin fingers gripping the edge of his command chair. The ship's metal groaned around them, a sound that no crew member wanted to hear in the emptiness of space. The ship's engineer, Blue, worked frantically at his station. His 4 arms moved across multiple control panels as he tried to understand what was happening to their vessel. "Captain, the main drive is failing. Something has gone wrong with the power distribution system, and it's cascading through all our backup systems." The stellar winds carried cargo worth more than most of the crew would earn in 10 cycles. Losing it wasn't an option, but with every passing moment, their situation grew more desperate. The ship's automated systems, designed for the comfort of species from low-gravity worlds, were struggling to compensate for the increasing system failures. "Check for any nearby ships or stations," Reed ordered his communications officer. The crew member's scaled skin reflected the emergency lights as she searched through subspace channels. Most of the crew came from worlds with gravity barely half of what some species called standard. They were built for efficiency and precision, not for handling emergencies in harsh conditions. "Captain," the communications officer's voice wavered slightly. "There's a station nearby, but it's a human station." The bridge fell silent except for the continued alerts from failing systems. Humans. Deathworlders. The very word made most of the crew uncomfortable. Everyone had heard stories about the species that evolved on a planet trying to kill them at every turn. Their heavy bones, dense muscles, and aggressive problem-solving methods made them a source of both fear and forbidden fascination throughout the galaxy. Another warning light joined the others. The life support systems were now showing signs of strain. They had no choice. "Open a channel," Reed ordered, trying to keep his voice steady. His species prided themselves on logical decisions, and right now, logic dictated they needed help, even if it came from humans. The response came quickly. The human station's commander listened to their situation and promised immediate assistance. "We'll send our best engineer right away," the human said. "Jack Miller is on standby for emergency repairs." The crew exchanged worried looks. They had expected the humans to send a rescue ship to tow them to safety. Instead, they were sending a single engineer, a human engineer who would be aboard their ship, moving among them with those powerful muscles and aggressive problem-solving instincts. "Perhaps we should wait for a proper rescue vessel," Blue suggested, his natural blue-tinted skin turning slightly pale. "Human methods of repair are unconventional, dangerous even." Another system failed, and the ship's artificial gravity flickered. Captain Reed watched his crew float momentarily before the backup systems engage. They were running out of options, and they all knew it. "We accept your assistance," Reed transmitted to the human station, trying to ignore the worried murmurs from his crew. "Please inform Engineer Miller we will prepare for his arrival." As the crew rushed to prepare for their incoming human guest, Reed reviewed what little he knew about humans. Their home planet, Earth, had gravity nearly twice what most spacefaring species considered comfortable. Their bodies were built to survive impacts, falls, and physical stresses that would kill most other species. Their minds were wired to see problems as challenges to overcome rather than warnings to heed. The docking alert sounded, announcing the arrival of the human small repair vessel. Through the bridge viewport, Reed watched it approach. It was a simple craft, sturdy and functional rather than elegant. Just like its pilot, he thought. "All crew, prepare for human arrival," Reed announced over the ship's comm system. "Remember your safety training. Do not make sudden moves. Do not show signs of aggression. And most importantly, do not question their methods unless absolutely necessary." As the airlock cycled, Reed straightened in his chair. He had never worked with a human before, and he hoped this Engineer Miller understood the delicate nature of alien technology. The last thing they needed was a Deathworlder's brute force approach destroying their sophisticated equipment. Little did Reed know, this encounter would challenge everything he thought he knew about humans and their capabilities. The airlock door opened with a soft hiss, and the alien crew held their breath. Engineer Jack Miller stepped through, his standard human EVA suit making solid thuds against the metal floor. To the aliens' eyes, the suit looked like heavy battle armor, its sturdy construction a stark contrast to their own lightweight environmental gear. "Thanks for having me," Jack said simply, his voice calm and professional. He carried a large toolbox in one hand, as if it weighed nothing, despite the ship's artificial gravity working at full strength. Captain Reed noticed several crew members backing away slightly. "Welcome aboard the Stellar Winds," Reed managed to say, his antenna twitching nervously. "This is Blue, our chief engineer. He will show you the affected systems." Blue stepped forward reluctantly, all four arms held close to his body in a defensive posture. "The main engine control room is this way," he said, pointing down the corridor. "But you should know our systems are very delicate. They require a gentle touch." Jack nodded, already walking toward the indicated direction. His movement was steady and purposeful, each step echoing in the quiet ship. The toolbox swung easily at his side, occasionally clanking with the sound of heavy tools that made Blue wince. In the engine room, warning lights continued their urgent dance across control panels. Jack set down his toolbox and immediately began examining the nearest console. Without asking permission, he pulled up the system diagnostics and started scrolling through data faster than the aliens thought possible. "Your power distribution network is completely scrambled," Jack said, frowning at the readings. "And these backup systems, they're not engaging properly. Mind if I take a look behind this panel?" Before Blue could protest, Jack had already removed the access panel, revealing a maze of delicate circuits and power conduits. The human's large hands moved with surprising precision as he traced various connections. "You've got thermal damage here, and here," he pointed out. "And this whole section is about to fail." "Impossible," Blue exclaimed, his color shifting to a deeper shade of agitation. "Those systems are triple redundant. They can't all be failing at once." Jack pulled out a handheld scanner from his toolbox. "They're failing because your primary power regulator overloaded. The surge protection didn't kick in fast enough, and now it's causing a cascade effect. We need to shut down the entire grid and restart from auxiliary power." "Shut down the grid?" Blue's voice rose in panic. "That's against every safety protocol. The system could be permanently damaged." "It's already permanently damaged," Jack replied calmly, reaching for his toolbox again. "Right now, we're just choosing what kind of damage we want to deal with. I can fix a dead system. Can't fix one that's melted itself into slag." Captain Reed, who had been watching from the doorway, felt his antenna droop in worry. "The cargo," he began. "We'll be fine," Jack finished, already pulling out tools that looked more suited for construction than delicate repairs. "I've got portable power units that can keep critical systems running. But we need to move fast." Without waiting for permission, Jack began setting up his equipment. His movements were quick but controlled, each action purposeful. The alien crew watched in horror as he attached what looked like primitive power cells to their sophisticated systems. "This is madness," Blue whispered to Captain Reed. "He's going to destroy everything with these crude devices." Jack overheard the comment but kept working. "These crude devices kept the lights on during solar storms back on Earth. They'll keep your ship running long enough for us to fix the real problem." He paused, looking directly at Blue. "Unless you'd prefer to wait for a proper repair team. Though I should mention your secondary coolant system has about 20 minutes before it fails completely." The ship groaned again, as if emphasizing Jack's point. Captain Reed looked between his engineer and the human, then made a decision. "Proceed with your repairs, Engineer Miller. But please, be careful." "Always am," Jack replied, his hands already moving to the main power controls. Now, you might want to hold onto something. This restart is going to be a bit bumpy. The alien crew quickly grabbed nearby handholds, watching with a mixture of fear and fascination as the human prepared to either save or destroy their ship with his unconventional methods. The ship's lights flickered and died as Jack initiated the power shutdown. Emergency lighting cast long shadows through the engine room, and the usual hum of machinery fell silent. The alien crew's breathing seemed unusually loud in the quiet darkness. "Main power is down," Jack announced, his voice steady in the darkness. "Now comes the tricky part." He pulled out a small light from his belt and held it between his teeth as his hands moved quickly over the exposed circuits. A warning alarm suddenly blared through the ship. The sound made several crew members jump. "Life support is failing faster than predicted," Blue reported, his voice shaking. "Oxygen recyclers are at 30% and dropping." "How long can your species survive without proper life support?" Jack asked, not looking up from his work. 4 hours at most," Captain Reed replied. "But the cargo, some of it is temperature sensitive. We have less than 2 hours before it starts to degrade." Jack nodded, continuing his work. "Then we have 1 hour to fix this." He reached deep into the machinery, doing something that made Blue gasp in horror. "You can't touch those connections with bare hands," Blue protested. "The residual energy cold could shock me, yeah," Jack finished, grimacing as a small spark jumped between his fingers. "Already has a few times, but insulated gloves are too bulky for this work." He pulled his hand back, examining a burned-out component. "Found your problem. Your power regulator didn't just fail, it exploded. Took out half the control circuits with it." Captain Reed's antenna drooped further. "That component is impossible to replace without a shipyard. It's integrated into—" "Nothing's impossible," Jack interrupted, already digging through his toolbox. "But you're not going to like my solution." He pulled out what looked like primitive circuit boards and a handful of cables. "Those are Earth components?" Blue asked, his color shifting to an even paler shade. "They're not rated for our systems. They're not rated for anything in known space." Jack laid out his tools and parts with quick efficiency. "They're rated for worse conditions than this. Earth tech has to work in everything from solar radiation to magnetic storms. It's not pretty, but it works." He looked up at Captain Reed. "I can bypass your fried regulator with these. It won't be permanent, but it'll get you to a proper repair station." The ship creaked ominously, and another alarm joined the first. "Temperature controls are failing in the cargo hold," a crew member reported over the comm. "Captain," Blue pleaded, "we can't let him modify our systems with that primitive technology. It goes against every safety regulation in the galaxy. We should evacuate while we still can." Jack kept working as they argued, his hand steady despite the increasing urgency of the situation. "You've got about 20 million credits worth of cargo, right?" he asked casually. "Evacuation pods won't be able to take that with you. Neither will most rescue ships, even if they got here in time." Captain Reed's antenna twitched as he calculated their options. The human was right. Abandoning ship meant losing the cargo, which would bankrupt the company. But letting him continue meant trusting their lives to Earth technology that barely met basic safety standards. "There's something else you should know," Jack added, his voice serious. "Those power surges damage your hull integrity system. Even if you evacuate, there's a good chance the ship will break apart when the next rescue vessel tries to tow it. All that cargo will be lost in space." A heavy silence fell over the engine room, broken only by the continuing alarms. Captain Reed looked at his crew, then at the cargo manifest, and finally at Jack, who waited patiently for the decision. "How certain are you that your solution will work?" Reed asked. "Certain enough that I'm staying on board to install it," Jack replied. "I don't ask anyone to trust technology I wouldn't trust myself." The captain's antenna moved in their species equivalent of a resigned sigh. "Proceed, Engineer Miller. But I want to know exactly what you're doing as you do it." "Of course," Jack said, already starting to wire his Earth components into the alien systems. First, we're going to create a bypass around your fried regulator. Then we'll need to reset the power grid section by section. And after that, he paused, looking at something deep in the machinery. We're probably going to need to go outside and fix your hull integrity field generators. They're not looking too good. The alien crew exchanged worried glances at the mention of spacewalking repairs, but they had committed now. They watched as the humans' hands moved with surprising grace, weaving Earth technology into their sophisticated systems in ways that would make any safety inspector faint. The alien crew watched in stunned silence as Jack worked without stopping for nearly 3 hours straight, his Earth-made components now connected to their ship systems, like a web of mechanical veins, pulsing with power in ways that made Blue's engineering training scream in protest. "Power grid is stabilizing," Jack announced, wiping sweat from his forehead. The ship's computer continued to flash warning messages about unauthorized modifications and unsafe power levels, but the lights were staying on, and the life support readings had stopped their dangerous decline. "Impossible," Blue muttered, checking the readings for the 5th time. "These connections shouldn't work. The power flow should be completely unstable." Yet the numbers on his screen showed steady power levels, even if they didn't match any normal operating parameters. "Different doesn't mean wrong," Jack said, already moving to his next task. He pulled himself into a maintenance shaft that the alien crew considered too cramped for safe work. His voice echoed from inside. "Sometimes the best solution isn't the prettiest one." Captain Reed monitored the situation from a nearby console, his antenna twitching less frequently now that the immediate crisis had passed. "How are you able to work in these conditions? The temperature in that shaft is nearly 40 degrees. "That's not so bad," Jack's voice came back, accompanied by the sound of tools against metal. "Try working in a reactor containment chamber during Earth's summer. Now that's hot." A loud clang made several crew members jump. "Sorry about the noise. This connection is stuck." Blue hovered near the maintenance shaft entrance, all 4 arms clutching different diagnostic tools. "The safety protocols say no one should work more than 30 minutes in these conditions. You've been at it for hours." "Human endurance," Jack replied simply. There was another clang, followed by a grunt of satisfaction. "Got it. Try the auxiliary power now." Blue reluctantly entered the commands. To everyone's surprise, the auxiliary power system hummed to life smoothly. The ship's computer still complained about the unorthodox setup, but even it couldn't deny the results. "That's the internal systems sorted," Jack said, pulling himself out of the shaft. His EVA suit was covered in grime and coolant, but he seemed unbothered. "Now for the tricky part. We need to fix those hull integrity field generators." Outside, a crew member squeaked. "In open space." Jack nodded, already checking his suit's seals. "The connections are fried. Can't fix them from in here." He looked at Blue. "I could use your help with this part. Need someone who knows the ship's exterior layout." Blue's color shifted rapidly between shades of anxiety. The safety protocols for exterior repairs require a full maintenance team, safety tethers, backup life support. "We don't have time for all that," Jack interrupted gently. "Those generators fail, and the hull starts coming apart next time we hit any kind of gravitational stress. I've got spare tethers in my toolkit. That'll have to do." Captain Reed watched the exchange with growing interest. The humans' methods violated virtually every safety regulation in their manual, yet they were working. More surprisingly, he was staying calm despite the dangerous conditions and the crew's constant doubts. "I'll assist you," Blue finally said, his voice shaking slightly. "But we follow at least basic safety procedures." "Wouldn't have it any other way," Jack agreed. He reached into his toolbox and pulled out what looked like primitive magnetic clamps. "These'll keep us anchored to the hull. Used them plenty of times back home." As they prepared for the spacewalk, the rest of the crew gathered to watch through the airlock's viewport. Jack checked Blue's suit seals personally, then double-checked his own. Remember, he said to the nervous alien engineer, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. We'll take it one step at a time. The airlock cycled, and the two engineers stepped out into the void. The crew watched as Jack moved across the hull with surprising grace, his magnetic boots making solid connections with each step. Blue followed more hesitantly, but Jack waited patiently at each point, offering encouragement through the comm system. You're doing great, Jack's voice came through the ship's speakers. Now let's see what we can do about these generators. And hey, at least the view is nice out here. The crew couldn't help but notice that while their own engineer trembled slightly in the vast emptiness of space, the human seemed perfectly at home among the stars. The vast emptiness of space surrounded Jack and Blue as they worked on the hull integrity field generators. Jack's makeshift repairs to the ship's systems seemed to be holding, but the real test was still ahead of them. Through the comm system, the crew could hear Jack explaining each step as he worked, his voice steady despite the dangerous conditions. "Hand me that power coupler," Jack said, reaching out without looking away from the exposed generator components. Blue carefully passed the tool, his movements still nervous but more confident than when they first stepped out. "The readings are stabilizing," Blue reported, checking his diagnostic tool. "But these power levels, they're well above normal operating parameters. Sometimes you need to push the limits a little," Jack replied. He was about to say more when a warning alarm blared through their comms. Inside the ship, the crew watched in horror as red warning lights flashed across every console. "Power surge detected," Captain Reed's voice crackled through the comm. "The main grid is overloading." Jack's reaction was instant. "Blue, get back to the airlock now." He shoved the alien engineer toward safety, his powerful push sending Blue gliding smoothly along their safety line. In the same motion, Jack pulled himself closer to the generator. "What are you doing?" Blue called out, already halfway to the airlock. "You'll be electrocuted." "Someone has to stabilize this manually," Jack answered, his hands moving quickly over the generator's controls. "The surge will fry every system on the ship if it isn't contained." Inside the ship, the crew watched their displays in growing panic. Power readings were climbing beyond any safe levels. The ship's computer was screaming warnings about imminent system failure. "Engineer Miller, return to the ship immediately," Captain Reed ordered. "That's too dangerous, even for a human." "With respect, Captain," Jack's voice came through between bursts of static. "We're out of options." His hands were deep in the generator circuits now, making adjustments that went against every safety protocol in existence. A burst of energy surged through the ship's hull. The crew saw a bright flash around Jack's position, and for a moment, his comm went silent. Blue had made it back to the airlock, but he stood frozen, watching the human work. "Jack!" Several crew members called out at once, their previous fear of the human forgotten in their concern. "Still here," Jack's voice came back, sounding strained but determined. "We're routing the surge through my suit's grounding system. Blue, I need you to cut power to sections 5 through 8, right now." Blue rushed to the nearest console, his forehands flying over the controls. He no longer questioned the human's methods. He had seen enough to trust Jack's instincts. Power diverted. The ship shuddered as Jack manually channeled the power surge through his suit and into the emergency grounding systems he had installed earlier. The Earth-made components he had added to the ship's systems proved their worth, handling the overflow of energy that would have fried the more sophisticated alien technology. Slowly, the warning lights began to dim. The power readings dropped back to safe levels, and the ship's computer stopped its urgent alarms. Through the viewport, the crew could see Jack still working, his movements now slower but no less precise. "Generator is stable," he reported, his voice tighter than before. "We lost some non-critical systems, but the hull integrity field is at full strength. Blue, want to help me close this up?" Blue didn't hesitate this time. He went back out through the airlock, moving with newfound confidence in his spacesuit. As he reached Jack's position, He noticed scorch marks on the human's EVA suit where the power surge had been grounded. "You're injured," Blue said, his voice filled with concern rather than its earlier fear. "Just a few burns," Jack replied, already focusing on securing the generator's access panel. "Nothing worse than a bad day in Earth's shipyards. Besides," he added with a hint of humor in his voice, "your ship is worth it." As they finished the repairs, the alien crew inside watched with new understanding. The human they had feared as a dangerous Deathworlder had just risked his life to save their ship, using methods that were crude by their standards, but undeniably effective. Captain Reed made a note in the ship's log, marking for the first time in the vessel's history that standard safety protocols had been correctly superseded by emergency circumstances. He added a special commendation for Engineer Miller's unconventional but life-saving actions. Back inside the ship, the medical bay's soft lighting reflected off the various diagnostic equipment as the ship's doctor examined Jack's burns. The human sat patiently on an examination table that was clearly designed for smaller species, his feet touching the floor while most aliens would have had to climb up. "These burns should take weeks to heal," the doctor muttered, scanning Jack's arm where the power surge had left its mark. "Yet your cellular regeneration is already beginning. Fascinating." "Human bodies are good at healing," Jack said simply. He looked over at Blue, who was examining the medical readings with all four arms crossed. "How are the ship's systems holding up?" "Everything is stable," Blue replied, his tone different now, respectful rather than fearful. "Though I must admit, I don't fully understand how your repairs are working. They go against everything I learned at the engineering academy." Jack smiled slightly. "Want me to explain? It's actually pretty simple once you understand Earth's engineering philosophy." The alien engineer moved closer, genuinely curious now. Captain Reed, who had been standing by the door, also stepped forward to listen. "On Earth," Jack began, wincing slightly as the doctor applied healing gel to his burns, "we learned early that space is trying to kill us. Our first ships were, well, they were death traps by your standards. We lost good people learning how to survive up here." The aliens listened intently as Jack continued. "So we developed a different approach. Instead of building perfect systems that never fail, we built tough systems that could be fixed when they did fail, because something always fails eventually. But our systems are designed to be perfect," Blue protested, though with less certainty than before. "The safety protocols are great when everything works as planned," Jack finished. "But space doesn't care about plans. Look at what happened today. Your safety systems tried to shut everything down when the power spiked. If they had succeeded, we'd have lost the ship." Captain Reed's antenna twitched thoughtfully. "Yet your Earth components handled the surge, despite being less advanced." "Because they're built to take abuse," Jack explained. "Earth's electromagnetic storms would fry your delicate systems. We had to build tough, had to learn how to repair things on the fly, how to improvise with whatever we had on hand." The doctor finished applying the healing gel and stepped back, unable to hide his fascination with Jack's rapid healing. "Like your bodies," he added, "built to survive damage rather than avoid it entirely." "Exactly," Jack agreed. He stood up, testing his injured arm. "It's not always pretty, but it works. Sometimes being too perfect, too careful, means you can't handle it when things go wrong." Blue moved to one of the medical bay's computer terminals and pulled up the ship's engineering schematics. Would you show me how your repairs work? I should understand them if I'm going to maintain them until we reach a repair station." Jack walked over to the terminal, pointing out the modifications with his good arm. "See here. We bypassed the main power regulator with 3 smaller ones in parallel. It's redundant. If one fails, the others pick up the load. We do the same thing in our space stations back home." The alien engineer's eyes widened in understanding. "That's why it survived the power surge. The load was distributed instead of concentrated, but our engineering principles always stress centralized control." "Different worlds, different solutions," Jack said. "Your way works great when everything's perfect. Our way works better when everything's going wrong. Maybe the best approach is somewhere in the middle." Captain Reed watched as his chief engineer and the human fell into a deep technical discussion, their earlier prejudices forgotten in their shared enthusiasm for solving problems. The humans' crude but effective methods had saved their ship, their cargo, and their lives. More importantly, they had opened the crew's eyes to a different way of thinking. The captain made another note in his log, this one recommending that the company consider adding Earth engineering techniques to their standard procedures. He also noted that perhaps the term Deathworlder needed updating. These humans weren't primitives who simply survived a harsh world. They were innovators who had learned to thrive in it. As he watched Jack sketch out another Earth engineering principle on a datapad, Reed realized that the galaxy might have more to learn from these humans than anyone had suspected. 3 days had passed since the crisis, and the stellar winds hummed with a different kind of energy. The ship's engines were running smoothly, though not exactly according to factory specifications. Jack's modifications had created what he called a hybrid system, combining the best of Earth's robust engineering with alien precision. Main engine power at 98%, Blue announced from his station, all 4 arms moving confidently across controls that now included several Earth-style manual overrides. Hull integrity field holding steady at full strength. Captain Reed sat in his command chair, watching his crew work with a new sense of confidence. The fear and uncertainty of the past few days had been replaced by something unexpected, curiosity. Every crew member had spent time learning about Jack's repairs, asking questions about Earth engineering, and sharing their own knowledge in return. "We're approaching the repair station," the navigation officer reported. "They're requesting a status update on our unconventional repairs." Jack looked up from where he was teaching a junior engineer how to maintain one of his bypass systems. "Tell them the truth. The ship's running on a combination of their tech and ours. It's not standard, but it works better than either system alone." The repair station's response came quickly and with unexpected enthusiasm. News of the stellar winds crisis and its unusual solution had spread through nearby sectors. Several other ships in the station were requesting information about Earth engineering techniques, particularly for emergency situations. "Looks like you've started something," Captain Reed said to Jack, his antenna moving in an expression of amusement. "Our company has received 6 requests for human engineering consultants since we reported our situation." Jack shrugged, a human gesture the crew had come to understand meant modest acceptance. "We're just practical. When you grow up on a world that's constantly trying to kill you, you learn to be flexible with your solutions." Blue approached them, holding a datapad filled with engineering notes. "I've documented all your modifications, Jack, but I'd like to keep some of them even after the standard repairs are complete, especially the manual bypasses and the redundant power systems." "The safety inspectors won't like that," Jack said with a slight smile. "Let them complain," Captain Reed replied firmly. "I've already submitted a formal request to update our safety protocols. Sometimes the safest approach is having options when things go wrong." The ship docked smoothly at the repair station. Through the viewports, they could see other alien vessels of various designs. A small crowd of engineers had gathered, eager to see the Earth modifications that had saved a ship that should have been lost. "Will you stay to oversee the repairs?" Blue asked Jack, trying not to sound too hopeful. "For a few days," Jack agreed. "Want to make sure everything's properly integrated. After that." He paused, looking at Captain Reed. "Well, that depends on what your company decides about human engineering consultants." Reed's antenna twitched happily. "I've already received authorization to offer you a position. Seems our cargo's safe arrival more than justified the expense. We need someone to teach our engineers how to think outside their safety protocols. When appropriate, of course." The news spread quickly through the ship. The crew, who had once feared having a human aboard, now celebrated the possibility of keeping their unconventional engineer. Even the ship's computer had been reprogrammed to accept certain Earth engineering parameters as acceptable alternatives rather than safety violations. As repair crews began boarding the stellar winds, Jack stood with Blue and Captain Reed, watching the organized chaos of the station's activities. Other ships' crews were pointing at their vessel, discussing the story that was quickly becoming legend in the sector. "You know," Jack said thoughtfully, "back on Earth, we have an old saying, necessity is the mother of invention. Sometimes the worst situations bring out the best solutions." And sometimes, Reed added, his antenna moving in what Jack now recognized as sincere respect, the best solutions come from the places we least expect them. He looked at his crew, now confidently explaining Jack's modifications to the amazed repair teams. Perhaps that's the real lesson here. Not that humans are surprisingly capable, but that all species have something valuable to teach each other. Blue nodded in agreement, his color shifting to a warm, happy shade, even if those lessons come with a few safety violations. "Especially then," Jack laughed. "Now, who wants to learn how to install an Earth-style emergency backup system? I promise it'll only break about half your safety protocols." The gathered engineers, both from the ship and the repair station, moved closer eagerly. As Jack began explaining another unorthodox but effective solution, Captain Reed made his final log entry about the crisis. "Sometimes the greatest danger isn't in trying something new, but in being too afraid to try at all."